Thank you very much. And of course, there's a wide consensus that today's budget was favorable to the manufacturing sector, given the moves that the government has taken, not only to protect local industries, but also to make it easier to conduct business. Now, joining us to look deeper into the measures is Adan Mohammed, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Industrialization and Enterprise Development. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, I mentioned earlier that despite this being called a Mwananchi budget, the question for us is it a Mwananchi budget, or is it a budget created by a government that is afraid to further tax its citizens? But of course, you're the happy man tonight. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think, first of all, the 1.8 trillion budget is unprecedented. It's the highest in the history of Kenya. And it seeks to address some of the key issues that Kenyans have raised in terms of dealing with the concerns that they have. So if you think about the high cost of living that Kenyans have complained about for a long time, significant amount of focus has been paid to that particular area. Kenyans have raised issues about unemployment, which is a serious issue. There are concerns about security in this country, you know, in many ways and different formats. There are issues around, you know, skills development that people are concerned about, and Kenyans are concerned about access to quality healthcare. So these are all very important areas that Kenyans have raised concerns, and this budget, you know, squarely addresses significant number of those issues in a really big way. The second aspect of what this budget addresses is to deal with really bolstering our revenue collection generally. And our revenue today, to a large extent, is coming from the private sector, people who employ others and are creating opportunities for additional revenue. And if you think about why the private sector has not thrived for a very long time, it's because primarily of some major bottlenecks, especially in the area of infrastructure. Issues around the business environment concerning security issues, the macroeconomic environment, ease of doing business, which has created significant amount of bureaucratic bottlenecks for them. So this budget addresses all these issues, whether you look at it from a Mwananchi point of view or indeed you look at it from a business point of view.
Let's look at your ministry now. Industry, of course, has the capacity to generate millions of jobs as well as to absorb the millions of Kenyans out there who don't have jobs. Apart from the industrial parks, which I'd like to hear more about from you just now, there didn't seem to be much else in terms of creating growth opportunities.
Well, the manufacturing sector, and I guess the entire private sector, have spoken to the government a number of times in raising issues that actually have been curtailing their growth. And a significant number of those relate especially to infrastructure areas. High cost of energy, both in terms of the price but also the supply. So the government has invested significant amount of money in increasing not only the supply but also to reduce the cost of power in the next 3 to 5 years. So that is why you see a significant amount of allocation in that area. Cost of logistics, whether it's moving things around the country or between the port of Mombasa into the region, has also been a significant cost to businesses, and that is why the standard gauge railway will make significant improvement in easing some of those pains that people have had. So the private sector have raised issues, whether it's in the roads, energy, transport, issues going on at the port of Mombasa. These are things that now has been taken head on by allocating significant amount of allocation in this budget, which will have a significant amount of long-term impact in the future. That is what the private sector have raised as transformational, you know, investments that this country needs so much. And they are expensive, but they will create the necessary transformation that we need in this country.
Let's just stick with energy for a little bit, which of course you say is one of the key challenges facing manufacturers in the country. In a State of the Nation address, the President talked about adding about 5,000 megawatts to the national grid within the next 3 years, and 80% of Kenya should be covered by electricity by then. But given the level of investments we're seeing in the energy sector, when do we as Kenyans begin to see the fruits of that investment?
Well, what you actually would see is the 5,000 megawatts that we want to bring onto the grid is actually all private sector financed. So if we were to finance that, then this budget will be significantly higher than that. So the private sector is financing the actual generation of a lot of this thing. What the government is financing is actually largely the transmission of this, and to some extent some generation, especially within the geothermal area. So this is expected to come on stream in the next 3 or 4 years, and we've had 1,700 megawatts in the last 50 years. To move in the next 3 years by additional 5,000 megawatts, I think I can only describe it as transformational. And it will not only be attracting new players that are power hungry, especially, heavy manufacturing industries, but also the price would be as competitive as one would get within the sub-Saharan Africa region.
Let's talk about the industrial parks. How will they work, and what can Kenyans expect to see from them?
You see, today, many investors, be they local or international investors, struggle to find industrial land. And people come, and the complications of acquiring land is complex, whether you end up with a fake title deed or indeed significantly priced piece of real estate. And that puts off a lot of people from actually investing in our country. So what we are working on is to create industrial parks, and they come in so many different names, industrial zones. You may have heard about, EPZs before. So it's just really an increase of those type of activities to make it easy for people to come with land that is available. They don't have to worry about, is this an issue or not. Services and infrastructure are provided. It makes it much more easy for somebody to come and actually put up their necessary warehouses or factories as a way of producing whatever they need to do. That is a significant differentiator for countries that have large industrial parks versus those that don't. And what we are working on is, as the standard gauge railway is developed along the Nairobi-Mombasa, highway, we want to identify distinct areas that would be marked as industrial parks, because logistics is available, power will be available. We just need to provide land, which hopefully will come at a fairly low price than it currently does.
Let's talk about the young people. Now, in Kenya today, an estimated 15 million people are unemployed. The majority of those are young people. What can we expect from your ministry in terms of engaging young people towards manufacturing or industry as a whole? And I guess in essence what I'm asking is, what is your priority levels in as much as youth are concerned?
Well, what you haven't seen in the budget today are some of the details that underpins what specific ministries are doing. So, for example, within the Ministry of Industrialization, we've looked at the different sectors that this country has in terms of creation of opportunities for jobs, but also, production of goods. What we have done is to focus on sectors that have very high labor content, and also where we have sufficient amount of raw materials to actually succeed in those sectors. So for that reason, we picked to emphasize the leather sector, where we have significant number of leather products in this, and the market is available, and also the textile. We have access to the AGOA and the European markets, and we've got significant number of unemployed Kenyans in this country. So today we do about $300 million or so of apparels exports, for example, to the US and Europe, when a country like Bangladesh does $23 billion. We're saying we have all the ingredients that are necessary to do that. Why shouldn't we? So there'll be a lot more of that we will be able to share in subsequent sessions, but those two specifically are the ones that we are focusing as a ministry. But there are a lot of other areas that youth employment opportunities will be created. We have dedicated re-engineering activities going on in the National Youth Service. The construction of the standard gauge railway will create a significant number of opportunities, the same in the energy sector. And the private sector, as we continue to improve the business environment for them, will continue to expand. And that way, I think the multiplier effect will come in. And so for that reason, we're confident that we will beat the 1 million job opportunities that we need to create, right from the small and medium-sized enterprises to the big organizations.
We did see announcements of some protectionist moves, if I can use that word, towards the manufacturing sector. Customs bonds on industrial sugars have now been, and wheat have been removed. What exactly does this mean, and how does that impact industry today?
I think one of the things that as a country we have been working on in the last few months has been to improve our competitiveness globally. And so part of that is to see what are some of the things that we do that best make it difficult for people not to compete effectively. So asking for bonds, security bonds, financial bonds, when people are importing, just makes it more expensive for people actually to, to do things. And the cost of those bonds get transferred to the ultimate consumer. So what the Cabinet Secretary has done is by removing that, that will not only make it easier for people who are importing these products to actually get things right from the port into their factories, because before they had to make a lot of compliance issues, but it will also be much cheaper. So hopefully we should be able to see this pass to the final consumer.
Finally, as we wrap up, imported steel products will now be attract an import duty of about 25%. What is the immediate impact of this as we wrap up?
Well, the one big thing that we are focusing on just beyond the steel is really emphasizing and focusing on Buy Kenya products. We are encouraging industries to be based here. We are making all the necessary conducive environment and conditions that would make it work for people. So what has been picked up, which I think is not only the only one but other areas, is to make sure that when people come and invest in the iron and steel industry in this country, we shouldn't allow imports that are coming in without duty or with a small amount of duty, thereby displacing and killing actually businesses that have invested in this country for the long haul. So this is just to make sure that we protect jobs that are here and make sure that we encourage people to come and invest here rather than import.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. That's Adan Mohammed, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Industrialization and Enterprise Development.